Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedicte, and I'm feeling weather sick.
And I'm Benedikt. Today is May 28th. This is episode number 202. And I'm feeling excited because we have a guest. It's been a long time since we had a guest. So welcome to the show, Shai Schechter. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am feeling curious today.
That's nice. So for our listeners that don't know who you are, would you mind introducing yourself like in a short version and maybe telling a little bit about what you've been up to in the past couple of years?
Yeah, so my name's Shai. I grew up in England and I was running a company, a SaaS called RightMessage, which I exited just over a year ago. And I've spent the last year not working on any SaaS company.
That sounds nice for a change.
We were like, yes.
So can you tell us a little bit more of what RightMessage is doing or was doing?
Yeah, so RightMessage was a marketing platform. So it was a suite of tools for increasing conversions on your website, learning about your audience with segmentation, pop-ups and questionnaires, and figuring out what people are doing on your site and how you can best help them, and then personalizing the experience that they get on your website, on your email list.
So they get the right message.
You got it.
This is so much better than the Unleash episode, which took me the whole episode until I realized that it was feature flagging and it was called Unleash because you unleashed a feature. But that took me.
I swear it was like, it was a few years before I realized that WhatsApp is because it sounds like WhatsApp and it's an app.
What's up? It's not easy being a grown person on the internet. Or a geriatric internet person, I guess you are at this point. But how long had you been at it with RightMessage before the exit that we will come back to?
So it started 2017 and exited 2023. So 6 years. And then there was a few months before 2017 that I had forgotten about until I did. I was writing all about writing the whole story recently. And I realized that there were little seeds of it in 2016 as well.
Interesting.
Were you two people because you were two people. Were two people from the beginning, or did you become two people, or how did that happen?
Yeah, so it was two people from the beginning, me and Brennan Dunn. And we grew to more than two people for a while. We built up a team. And then a few years in, we went back to being two people again.
I remember back then I felt like you had what others would consider like the dream launch of like launching to, I don't know, a couple of thousand MRR basically in week one or something like that. I remember seeing some charts and was like, whoa, like they must be knowing what they're doing. So that was pretty impressive. And I guess you also got a lot of funding initially, right?
Yeah, so the thing I love about the RightMessage story, which I love it more now that I'm looking at it from the outside, is like it's there's so much that you can learn from it, because like it's such a cautionary tale of what happens when you think things are going better than they are. There's like there's just this, like you say, it was more than a couple thousand. It was, so pre-launch and launch week together was about $75,000.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and like you say, that's just dream amazing situation, but there were buts to that. Like it wasn't all plain sailing from there, and I think we told some of that story along the way as well. But it's hard to, like, you know this from when you're talking about SaaS, like it's hard to balance talking about the ups and the downs, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think we mentioned this like a couple of episodes ago where we talked about it's not because you kind of don't want to share the downside. It's just that the downside takes longer to digest. So when you've digested it, you're kind of done with it and you forget about talking about it if that makes sense. Like when you're having success, it's like very easy to make it into like something you can say, but like the buts or the downsides are much less clear, and it takes maybe a year until you can actually talk about it where it makes sense for other people, because otherwise it's just like going through a hard time where things are bad but you don't understand it. You need time to kind of digest it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's hard because like when you're in the middle of it, you don't always know. You don't know whether it's a very temporary thing that's barely even worth thinking about, or whether it's a serious issue that needs dealing with, and your mind is in like you're needing to deal with it. And so yeah, it's I think I agree with that. It's hard to know how to share it down, not because you don't want to share it down, but because there's so much more nuance to it. There's so much more. It's harder to prize apart what's going on.
More
Yeah.
feeling, more emotions.
More emotion. And also, I mean, I also feel like as soon as it also involves other people, it's like you have to be extra careful. Or at least I tend to be extra careful to not like jump to conclusions or throw anyone before in front of a bus or something like that accidentally, or like not intentionally, but like sometimes being in a bad situation, you're not quite sure what the right way to deal with it is until, well, afterwards. And in hindsight, it's always easier, right?
And you don't know what the other person maybe is sharing with their family, for instance, or like their
Right.
friends, and then suddenly you're on a podcast talking about how you're losing money every month, and somebody's husband is listening or wife is listening and is like, say what now? Like this is not the
Yeah.
story you've been telling me. Like what is happening here? So you're kind of sharing other people's secrets as well, if it feels like a secret, I guess.
No, yeah, these are all I hadn't thought about. Like there's so many layers to this, because it can also have an impact on the business. Like this whole build in public movement, sharing like as honestly as possible what's going on. You can also have situations where, like, if you start talking about some troubles that the company is in, that can become self-fulfilling. That can, people could be wary to buy from that company. Like it can have an impact.
But what were some of the buts? Now that we're looking back, what were some of the buts of an amazing launch?
The buts, and I want to make very clear here as well, this isn't, I'm only talking about it because I'm out now. This is all stuff that like me and Brennan had talked about, the fact that we were open to talking about this stuff during and after. So
yeah,
I'm not. Yeah,
you're not
like I'm out, and now I'm dishing all the dirty secrets about this company that's still trying.
Well, that's why we're having you on. Like we thought that was going to be the conversation. Are you telling me? No, just kidding. No, but what were some of the buts? Because I do think for people who haven't been in it or haven't been around this kind of this ecosystem for long, kind of don't realize that a successful launch might not always be a great thing. So
Yeah.
like you can generalize some buts from that for us. I think that would be interesting for people who are like, well, our launch wasn't good enough, or I wish I had a launch like that, or hoping to get a launch like that.
Yeah. So the challenge with a big launch, we assumed that a big launch meant that we had cracked it, we had found what people want. This is the whole, there's all this thing of like, if people are telling you that they would buy your product, that's not enough. But if people are actually putting their money in, then you're onto something, right? And that's true to a point, but people putting their money in doesn't actually mean that you're building a thing that's valuable for them. It can also mean that you're very good at marketing the promise of what they might get. It doesn't mean that you've found what they actually need yet. And so that's largely what was happening here. There was a lot of hype about the product. There was we both had existing audiences, Brennan bigger than mine, and people were excited for what we were making. All this hype had built. And so if you look at that graph from the early days, it's just up and up and up and up. And then the churn catches up, right? Those people who were all buying at launch, they wanted the launch discount, they wanted to be the first in to try it. They didn't actually need what we were making, or it wasn't translating to exactly what they needed. And so once that hype dies down, they all started canceling. And then the reality starts to kick in. It's like, oh, and we were spending by that point as well. We'd started building a team because we just saw this trajectory going up and up. And we're like, let's capitalize on this. Let's get the team. Let's build bigger and faster. And then it didn't. And then it started to level out.
Right.
What did people say though? Did they just churn quietly, or was there like a backlash? I have not followed this story, as closely. Were there like people like it wasn't like what you promised, or was it more like, oh, we didn't need it, or
It was kind of a we didn't need it. It was like, this is cool, but it's not. I feel like it's for bigger companies. Like there's lower hanging fruit for us to deal with first. It was that kind of thing. No one was. Yeah, there was a lot of this product is really good. We really like using it, but it's just it wasn't actually connecting to something that they needed, that they were willing to invest time in. It wasn't. It was kind of a new-ish. We were very much on the like. We were selling the fact that if you personalize your marketing, you will sell more. And people were not, until that point, personalizing their marketing at all. So this wasn't, they were switching from another product. This was, they were switching from nothing. Like this was almost a new product category for them. And that's a very hard sell because they end up, that's an extra thing on their plate that wasn't on their plate before.
mm-hmm. Because they would then need to change their habits and their kind of internal messaging.
Yeah. And so there were some companies that were able to like see really good results and they stuck with it and they've stayed for years and years and they're loving it. There are some companies who have kind of a person dedicated to that and that works really well for them. But it was, yeah, there was a lot of cancellations with like, we plan to be back in the future.
Sounds familiar.
So just because I'm curious, and this, I mean, it's not really on topic, but it's about RightMessage. So which companies did it really work for? The ones that didn't churn and you who said I used it for years, like what were some markers of those companies? Just like personally interested in.
A lot of it was kind of this sweet spot of size of company. Like it worked better for bigger companies with higher volume, but at the same time, we dabbled with it a few times, but like we didn't want to be doing the enterprise, like the high touch sales thing. We dabbled with it, we didn't like it. Just as a personal preference, that wasn't where we enjoyed selling. So the companies that did really well were kind of on this sweet spot of big enough that they could really see the benefit and they could invest in getting their benefit without being so big that we had to like go through several month sales cycles and the stuff that we didn't want to be dealing with.
Yes, there was still self-service. Somebody with a credit card just signed up and got started. Because I think a lot of people we talk to in this space think they're gonna get away with not doing enterprise sales, and then at some point they realize that they'll need to do enterprise sales, and it's a hard transition, or you got to either say no or you got to do it. Like it's a very hard thing to do halfway.
I think the biggest thing is to get really clear about which one of those ways of selling do you like, and which one of those ways of selling does this particular product need. And yeah, I think for us
they better overlap,
it was the mismatch. Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think maybe a lot of you don't, if you're new to the game, these are things you usually don't think about. It's like, oh, I have an ID, I think it fits, like we see demand, and then you don't think about what if we're successful, or what if this is for bigger companies? Like that is a totally different way of running a company, and that was not maybe what you wanted, which is fair, but it's something that I think we often forget to think about on the onset. Like what kind of company will this ID need, and can we get away with doing it in a different way?
Yeah, but I guess it's also something that you only learn by doing, right? I mean, unless you're super good at all of this and like have a lot of experience and can spot these things ahead of time, I feel like most of the time you start working on a product and releasing a product with a hypothesis that doesn't necessarily survive first contact with the market, right? And then over time you realize, oh, actually, like the target audience that we thought is our target audience isn't our target audience, and this is better suited for someone else. And then eventually you maybe realize that, oh, enterprise sales is what we should be doing. So I wish there was a secret formula, but I'm not sure there is one.
I guess most business to business software that is quite expensive to run needs large customers at some point.
Yes,
But maybe
true.
not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. It looks like the Banner Bear and now Robot Rabbit is still not doing any enterprise
See,
sales.
maybe there is some categories where you don't need it.
Maybe there is. Anyway, back to the message story. I'm just thinking out loud. My unfocused day here. How did you guys get the idea? And then we can like move on to the next part of the story where you're exiting.
The idea came from, it was a few things. Me and Brennan both came from a background of being software people and then transitioning into the online marketing world. And when you're a software person and you're looking at a marketing site, the idea of having your marketing site be a little bit dynamic and change based on who was visiting it wasn't this huge groundbreaking idea. Like for a programmer, a website is a website. Like it's the same technology that powers Facebook that powers a landing page. And so when a developer is doing marketing, there is you very quickly come to this idea of why are we pitching joining our email list to people who have already joined the email list, for example. All the technology is there to know that they've already joined your email list. So why don't we use that real estate on the screen to promote something that's more useful for both parties? And so Brennan and I had been doing that kind of thing on some of the sites he was working on, and I was at a business retreat with him in Bangkok, and we started talking about the idea of taking that and making it, SaaSifying it, making it so that all the marketers who are looking at that and being like, oh, how do you, I want to do that on my site. And we'd be like, okay, we can code that for you. That kind of becomes this consulting freelance project that you can do for them. But what if there was a platform where people could set this up for themselves? And the beginning of it was, we kind of said, I was adamant that I wasn't going back into SaaS. I was very happy in the consulting business that I was running at the time. But there was just enough excitement around the idea that we were like, yeah, we've got to, if we don't, someone else will. And actually, this could be kind of fun.
So the hype was already building back then, I guess.
Yeah.
Even it was just between two of you.
That's the thing. It was between two of us, but there was a very build in public vibe to it. So it was everyone. I was going back through the old tweets the other day, all the very early seeds where we started talking about this stuff, and people were excited and people were eager to have it and to use it. And so we ended up, at the very beginning, when we were resistant to starting a SaaS, we said we were only going to start building if we got $10,000 of pre-orders. And we got $10,000 of pre-orders. And that was when we started writing code.
So it sounds like you did everything by the book, more or less, right? Get an idea, validate the market,
right?
Have an amazing launch.
Make sure they don't just say they want to buy, but they actually buy.
Yep, we effectively wrote the next chapter of the book that hadn't been written yet, which was after people put their money down, that doesn't mean you have product market fit. That means they're excited about the potential of solving the problem you're talking about.
When did it stop being fun?
So there was a period a few years in where it was kind of plateauing, but there was a period in the middle of the 6 years where it was plateauing, but we were so okay with that because we were both going through just personal stuff at the time, and having this SaaS that was more or less passive. When we didn't have the headspace to work on it. Brennan was having a baby and moving across the Atlantic. I was going through a divorce. So having this business that when we didn't have the headspace to be in it, that it was still paying us money was just amazing. So that time in the business wasn't that fun, but it was so beneficial. I'm so grateful that we had it. And after that, when everything had calmed down in our personal lives and then the business was still not that fun, that was when I think a lot of the fun at the beginning had been because it was growing. And this is when people ask me how important it is to be working on a project, like in a problem space that you're really passionate about, I think where I land on that now is it's not that important at all while you've got solid growth. If what you're trying to do is build, like, if let's say MRR is your goal, I don't think it's that simple, but let's say MRR is your goal. Whilst everything is going well, I don't think it's very important that you're super passionate about what you're solving. However, there will be times, it's not unheard of, it's not unlikely for there to be times when things are not going so well. And when they're not going so well, it's being passionate, it's really caring about what you're doing that's going to get you through those times. And that's why it's important.
So
Yeah,
you're saying
true.
you found that you were not that passionate about customized messaging? Is that what you're saying? Or am I reading you wrong?
No, that's and I'm trying to think, like, was I passionate about them at the beginning? To some extent, I was more passionate about it, and my values changed over the years. And to some extent, I was passionate about it at the beginning because there was so much excitement around it. Like, did we ever stop to really think how much we... Yeah. No, I was more passionate about it at the beginning, and I think I shifted.
I think part of it, at least, I mean, from my own experience, doesn't necessarily have to be that you're passionate about the thing you're building, but passionate about the process, or passionate about solving a challenge, or passionate about figuring things out. Like, going on record here, I'm not that passionate about email marketing, but it's still interesting enough of a problem that it keeps me going, right?
You like the engineering challenge of it?
Yeah, that's a part for me. Yeah.
There's a lot of it, I think, is, this idea about, like, flow states, and there's all this stuff about how, like, the sweet spot, people talk about, like, doing things outside your comfort zone. That's where you feel really good and you're growing. But there's this nuance that, like, you go too far outside your comfort zone and you're in your panic zone, and then just that's not a sustainably fun place to be. So right. I think about that a lot, this idea of, like, being kind of living in that world that's always 10% outside the comfort zone. And your comfort zone will grow that way, and that's how we grow as people. But that there is that sweet spot of, I'm working on things that are challenging to me, but that I believe I can handle them. They're not so far beyond that it just feels hopeless. So I think that's, like, those challenges that come up in growing these businesses, they feel really good. You can feel really passionate about solving the problems, about working through those challenges, as long as they feel solvable. And then there can come this point where it's like, this is just, we're grinding, we're going round in circles, we're not getting anywhere, it's becoming frustrating. And when you get to that point, it's harder to want to keep putting your all into it.
Like, everything landed personally, and then you went your separate ways right away. What happened with the...
This is when we decided...
Because you said... Yeah, because I asked you, when did it stop being fun? And you said it stopped being fun, and it was fine, great to have the company while personal stuff was happening. And then that landed. And then I feel like that's the beginning of the end of the story.
Yeah. So then we're kind of we're going round in this loop at this point where we'll be like, okay, it's not growing how we want it to be. There are customers, and some of them are happy, and some of them are churning, and MRR was kind of pretty constant at the time, but it wasn't like we weren't enjoying working on it. It was we were trying to get it past this plateau, and we would kind of regroup and be like, okay, here's a new thing we can try, this little mini pivot or this new marketing strategy, or like, here's what we're going to try and do next. And we'd work on that. We'd get excited and we'd work on that for a while. And then when we still didn't see the growth that we were looking for, we'd get kind of demoralized and frustrated by it. Maybe we'd stop working so much on it. We'd go off and do our own things for a bit. And then we'd be like, oh, we're not. Like, what are we going to do with RightMessage? We need to get it growing. And we'd regroup and we'd find something else and we'd get excited and we'd try that. And we'd go around in circles like that for a while. And it just got to the point of, like, this isn't... I came to the realization that it was not, like, it just wasn't fulfilling for me. And I didn't get the sense that once I kind of knew I was putting it off for a long time as well. Like, once I was willing to be aware of the fact that I was not content with my work situation, I knew that I'd actually felt that way for a while. But it had been so much easier to just ignore that. I hadn't been ready to face that reality yet. And so like consciously I was telling people and myself that work's fine. It's going well. And the trigger moment was I was reading a book called The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. He's like the self-esteem guy. And chapter 1 is about like the first pillar of self-esteem is being, I think it's called living consciously. It's the idea of like being real about the current situation that you are in. If you're burying your head in the sand about something, if there's something that you're not being honest with yourself about in the current realities of your life, that's going to impact you. It's going to impact you in negative ways. And reading, like I just had this like, there was this like screaming foghorn inside me that like I didn't want to face at first. It's like right message. Like that's the thing that you are not facing in your life at the moment. And that was the point that I was ready to face it. Right. This like internal battle of like, and a lot of it is this is a default pattern of mine that I have worked on a lot since. But this idea of like not wanting to face like any negative stuff, like it's much easier to just like you suppress that, and it's like everything's fine. I don't have negative emotions. I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
I'm so happy.
That was the pattern I grew up with. Like, you know, get rid of the negative emotions. Everything's fine.
But not to be super stereotypical, but I am gonna be though. Isn't that like a very British way of dealing with your emotions?
I don't think it's just limited to British people.
I know. But there's something about like the politeness or like I don't know. There's this like pattern where you're supposed to like speak in a manner and talk in a certain way about things that don't always kind of loans itself to like being honest about your feelings.
I do see it more. I think you see it more in Western cultures than Eastern, and I think you see it more in Britain than in other than in many other Western cultures. And then there's going to be family-specific cultures that come into it. My mum, very loving, very optimistic, just wants everything to be good all the time. My dad was in the army for many years, and like so there you had this kind of, it was from these two different angles. You had this like negative emotions don't exist. One was like let's be happy all the time, and one was like not really showing emotion at all. It's like we get stuff done. So yeah, just between whether it's the country, the family, the whatever. I genuinely don't think I knew what negative emotions were until I was like well into my 20s.
I think we should include the feeling wheel that we actually use to sometimes pick our feelings at the beginning of this episode for everybody listening, because it is eye-opening.
I love a feeling wheel.
I think I had more negative feelings, during my upbringing. It wasn't as like you have to be happy all the time, but still, I could not name I could name a lot more happy feelings than I could name negative feelings when shown this feeling wheel many years ago. So we'll put that in the link, and the listener can have a little look at all of the negative feelings one can feel.
There are gender stereotypes as well. It's also a thing in a lot of cultures. Like men are allowed to feel anger. That's like that's like fear is not an option. Anxiety is not an option.
Yeah, I heard somebody say anger is one of those like not cloaking. I can't find the English word. It's like the anger you mask. You use to mask other emotions. So as you said, you feel jealous, you get angry. You feel sad, you get angry. You feel anxious, you get angry. It's a way to kind of just default to angry, because that is an easier, for many, an easier emotion to handle, and it's outwards. So you can then get angry at somebody for that feeling that you're not feeling.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like a masking emotion. But sometimes you're allowed to be angry too, though. Like we can't get rid of angry, because I feel sometimes people want to get rid of angry, which is also not a good thing. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's like, I think all of the, I've been on quite a journey of learning about myself and that internal world, and ultimately where it all seems to come down to is like the importance of fully feeling all of the emotions as they arise. Like they're all there for a reason. They're all there to tell you something. They're all there to learn from.
Smart. This might be
And then
the quote
there's
of
the quote of the podcast. And then I'll say, sometimes there are periods of your life where you just don't have the time to feel all of the emotions, because otherwise you wouldn't get anything done, which is not a good thing, but it's a fact sometimes.
right.
I have a scheduled crash this summer, for instance. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, so you read this book. What year are we now in?
We are in. We're at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. Yeah, we're at the beginning of 2023.
I think that's when we met. Is that when we met at MicroConf? Was that 2023? No, that was 2022.
No, it must be earlier.
Because it was right at the end of the pandemic. New York was open that week. Because I had a 24 hours in New York.
Okay.
Must have been 2022 then, maybe, or 2023. Anyway, for the listener, I met Shai at an improv workshop at MicroConf, and afterwards we laid on the floor when everybody came home from their whiskey tour or their beer tour, and that is how I know Shai. But I think that was around that time. Anyway, so you were in 2022, 2023, you read the book.
I think that would have been April 2022.
Yeah,
and
that
then this
sounds right.
I think that's right. And then, at the beginning of 2023, I had this realization of like, okay, I'm not enjoying this. I haven't been enjoying it or feeling fulfilled for it by it for a while. And did like a quick sanity check, spoke to a friend, like, walked through where I was at with it, which even that felt really good to get it out. This realization that I realized had been there for a while and I hadn't been facing, to then get that out already felt good. And then spoke to Brennan.
Was that easy to bring it up once you realized it, or did it take you a while to muster up the courage to talk to Brennan about that?
I didn't find it easy, but that's part of the same thing. If you grow up scared of negative emotions, then being in a situation that could cause them to arise in yourself or other people is also like a thing to stay away from. So yeah, it wasn't easy, but I knew it needed to be done. And he was relieved. He's like, yeah, I've been feeling that way too. So it was good to chat it out. And then came like, okay, so what do we do?
What did you do?
Or like maybe before, what did you do? What were the options, I guess?
Yeah.
What did you consider doing?
Yeah, so we did. I love doing this when you have a situation like this, to just brainstorm like, what are all the options? Like even the ridiculous ones that wouldn't make any sense. Let's just get them all down, and then we can eliminate. And so the options were things like sell the company, close the company down, one person buys the other person out. I don't remember what else was there. Those were like the key ones that ended up being considered. And leave it running. That was an option. Like, don't really put time in it, but just leave it running, and let it do its thing. That one we dismissed because like it would have dwindled eventually. It still would have been. I had this very strong sense, this like deep intuitive sense that there are things that I will be working on in the future that will be more fulfilling personally, and they'll be more impactful on the world, and that those things are not going to appear until I can let go of the current thing.
Right.
And so having it around, even if we weren't working on it, even if it wasn't taking up our time, it was just like, you're just prolonging the inevitable. That didn't sit well with me. It's not good for customers either. Like it just stretched everything out. Selling the company could have been a good option, but just the way it was structured and the way it hadn't been growing meant it like no one really would have won in the end. Investors wouldn't have seen much. We wouldn't have seen much. Like it was just, but this idea of Brennan buying out my shares and continuing it solo. Like, even though he had also been frustrated with it, he kind of saw this opportunity to integrate it more into his other business that he was running, and like he liked the challenge of seeing if he could get it growing again by bringing it in with those, and then customers would get to have it still running, and so we started going down that option. Worked for both of us, and we're like, yeah, let's try and do that.
Because Brendan's other business or side business, or I don't know how it is now, was like helping people segment their like he done doesn't he had like a segmenting or like email segmenting course and consultancy, or am I remembering incorrectly?
Yeah, so that some of that came after as well. Some of that was more recent.
Okay, yeah,
so
but it seems like he's more into the space. Like he enjoys the space in its
I would say
entirety.
Yes, he had a newsletter that was all about growing email lists. Yeah, in that world for sure. And it was hard to like. He would use that audience to try and get people into RightMessage, but I think he always felt a little bit. It's hard to like keep those businesses separate, but also have them try and like help get people from one field. It's messy.
So you sold your shares to Brennan and then left the company. How did that feel? Like, was it like a relief to be rid of it, or did like regret set in a day after, or how did that go?
There was never any regret. The main thing I noticed afterwards, like it was kind of weird to think like, oh, that's not like I'm not running that company anymore. It was that took getting used to, but there was never any doubt in my mind that it was the right thing for me to do.
That's good.
And that made the whole thing. Yeah, even like someone asked me afterwards, or during while we were in the process of selling of doing the buyout, and afterwards, people were asking me like, what if it got really mega successful now after you leave? Like, how would you feel? And I'm just like, I'd be so okay with it. Like, it's the right. I was just, and I'm often quite indecisive as a person with certain things, but I think that's just a sign that it's not like with this. There was just no indecision. It was like, this is the right thing for me to do, and so if it gets mega successful, awesome. People will benefit from that. And like, but that's like, what else can we do ever in these journeys apart from if you have an intuition of what to do, you follow that, you see where it goes. Like that's the path that we're meant to be on.
So back to the sale though, how's that structured? Was that a hard thing to land on?
It was, fortunately, like it was so straightforward. Once we decided that's what we were going to do, like it was a comically easy process. And I don't know that that's everyone's experience, but we just we got in touch with a broker, like someone that we knew at one of the SaaS brokers. He gave us a valuation of the company, and he gave us a recommendation for how you take that valuation and turn it into a buyout amount, because you adjust it slightly for like if you were selling it through the broker, then there'd be broker fees, and like you do a discount for those, and you do a discount for it being an all cash purchase instead of shares, and that gives you your buyout price. And so we did that. He gave us our valuation or a range, and told us how to turn it into a buyout price, and we were both happy with that number or that range. And so there is this. I looked the other day. There is a 9-message WhatsApp conversation between me and Brennan. Where we like negotiated the specifics of like where we were going to be within that range, and how like what the payment terms would be. Like it's not going to, whether we do it all up front or like monthly payments or whatever. It was 9 messages back and forth before we had everything agreed, and then we sent that to the lawyer, and the lawyer put together the documents, and like it was, like I say, like comically easy considering how challenging these things could be. But I think that's all. I think that's because we were both happy with the number. Like that's where you run into challenges, right? So yeah, it all that worked very well, and within like a couple of weeks, it was all done.
Nice. Probably also helps to be like on good terms, right? I mean, if things get ugly, like if there's like tension between the co-founders before that, and then I mean, we've seen some companies of friends go through this in the past where it didn't become yeah, a pretty long process and a lot of mud thrown around and like everyone trying to screw everyone else over, and it doesn't sound like that happened with you guys.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that reminds me of like when we were first starting the company. I remember we were having these discussions about how do we split the equity, whether we do 50-50. And I remember we were reading and getting advice and like seeing all this stuff about how you can't do 50-50 between two people, because if there's a disagreement, there's no one to make the final decision, and then that just that doesn't work. And we looked at do you make it 51-49? Do you have someone who gets to do you have a third board member who can settle disputes if the two can't agree? And we got to this point where we were like, this is ridiculous. Like if we're 50-50 and we get to a point where the two of us cannot come to an agreement on a certain the direction of where we're going, whatever it is, if we can't sit down over a drink and come up with an answer between the two of us, the company's screwed anyway. Like even if we brought someone else in to mediate that, if we can't do that between the two of us, that's the beginning of the end for the company. So, and that was where we landed. We did 50-50, just the two of us, and we got on with building.
You've got a point there.
And fortunately, we got all the way through 6 years without without ever having a situation that we couldn't resolve, sitting down and talking it out. So.
Yeah, but I guess it's also a little bit of the mindset that you have when you go into this, right? Like if you're all grown up about it and like open to talking about stuff and like figuring stuff out together, I think it's a pretty good way to approach this.
Yeah, which of course everyone is until they're not.
True,
but as you said, then you are screwed. But you said then you are screwed because if you then have some mediator come in and say we're going to do A, you can just not do the thing you decided. Like how's that going to play out? It's not
right. But even if you do, even if it worked for that situation, the fact that you've got to a state where a small company that has two founders and the two founders cannot compromise with one another, that company is not going to keep doing well.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But it isn't, because it sounds very much like divorces, because you have these couples who they're like, okay, this isn't working anymore. This is the things we own. We get an appraisal, we share it, and we're done. And then you have the others where that is not happening. And it's interesting to be bystanders, because it's not always the people you think. It's off. I've had a hard time predicting who was going to have a messy divorce and who has a straightforward divorce.
Yeah, and I think you've got to be sensible with these things in the sense that when we said that at the beginning of the company, when we said we were just gonna if we ever have a dispute, we'll be able to figure it out. You could take that all the way to its extreme and be like, so we're not going to have a contract, we're not going to have a shareholders agreement, we're just going to trust that everything works out. That's not sensible. The way I see it, and this is arguably the same, people do this with marriages as well. You have a prenup, not because you're saying that this is going to end badly, but just to be this way everyone is just on the same page about what's what. So you have the shareholders agreement, and you say this is this is how it works. You don't just trust that people aren't gonna. You don't have a situation where somebody could just steal all the money out of the company and leave or something. You put that document together, make sure everything, sort that out, and then the idea is that contract goes in the drawer and you never need to touch it again. But you have it.
And also, I think a lot of things with contracts is you've talked about the things you put in the contract. That is a lot of the worth of the agreement or the contract, is that you talk through the points you've agreed on, the terms or the things that put into contract, and it's very clear, so we know that we understand each other. And that is an important part of those kinds of contracts, is that it's just it's a way to say that we are on the same page, we agree on these things, and we are certain we agree on these things because they are now written and you have signed, and it's properly done. It's not something well, you said, and then 5 years down the line, who said, I don't remember what I said. I can remember it completely wrong.
Right.
Exactly. Depending on the
situation. And even if
what you
remember saying is exactly what you said, writing it down helps you to make sure you know that the other person heard it how you intended to say it.
Yeah, exactly.
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 Yeah.
Communication is very much a two-person thing.
Oh, is it? But so what are you doing now? You said you
It's been a year, right?
It's been a year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because when I left, I said I'm not going to let myself start something new for 2 months, and it's now been 13 months, and I have not been interested in starting something new. I'm getting to the point where I think I will want to soon, but my thing was like I'm not gonna start something new until I feel compelled to, from a place of like wanting to, not from a place of like I feel like I should be working, but from a place of there is a new thing that I want to move towards, right? I think about this a lot, the idea of in everything we do, are we doing it to move towards that thing, or are we doing it to move away from something else? When I pick up my phone and to like scroll social media, like that's is that a banned topic around here?
No. Go ahead. I'm just joking. I feel seen or unmasked. Go ahead.
I'm in this photo and I don't like it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like none of these behaviors are good or bad in themselves. Like if I sit down to watch TV, am I doing it because I want to watch that show, or am I doing it to avoid the feeling of boredom or the thing that I know I should be, that I want to be doing, but I'm scared to do it, whatever. And so I wanted to wait until there was something that I want to. Sorry?
But have you been bored, or has it just been smooth sailing?
Like it's been a wild year, with all sorts of adventures and traveling around the world and boats and all sorts of things.
So you haven't sat at home staring at the wall?
No. But I also I was so curious to see when you take away any obligations, I don't have to be getting up and going to work. There's no one who's expecting things of me in that way. What does my life then naturally look like? Do I feel compelled to? Do I find myself wanting to start working on something new straight away? Do I still want to do I get up early and go to the gym if I don't tell myself I have to do that? What's my relationship with self-discipline? With what do I actually want my day to look like? All those big picture questions I've been exploring. So I think actually I started the first month. I was like, I'm not going to tell myself I have to do anything. I'm not making myself go to the gym. I'm not whatever. I'm only going to do what I feel like doing, and I want to see what that looks like. And it was interesting to see which things, I found myself still eating quite healthily, even if I didn't put that expectation on myself that I had to. The gym was more hit and miss. I wanted to see what the habits were, and then from there, asking questions like, what do I want that to look like? To what extent is it good to force ourselves to do things that in the moment we don't want to do? And I'm still kind of exploring all those kinds of questions, but I think they are worth exploring.
So what has a typical week look like for you this year then? Or have they not been typical at all?
I was about to say, are there even typical weeks?
No, there are. I do find myself going between two extremes. I'll find myself in a country where I'm being very extroverted, socializing all the time, and then that'll get to a point where I'm like, I'm so done with that, and then I'll go and lock myself away in a cottage in the countryside for a few weeks and just chill. But yeah, there isn't a typical week. There was the week on a boat in the Grenadines, and there was the week. There was a time when someone got my name tattooed on them. There was. It's been. I met Sir Richard Branson the other day.
You did?
It's been a wild year. Just all sorts of weird and wonderful things happening.
Where are you at right now? Which part of the world?
Right now I'm in England. We had a family get together this weekend. So, and I think I want to stay in one place for the next several months, and I'm just deciding where that's going to be. And I want to get a job in a cafe. This is my latest realization.
Interesting.
No, I have a friend who's actually one of my earlier business mentors, and I'm in her program where we meet on Mondays to plan our week, and then we meet on Fridays to kind of evaluate the week. and she's always dreamed of being a librarian, and she lives on the west coast of Norway, and a librarian position came up, and she was like, I have to do this, like I need to do this. And she had to sit down with her family, and it's like, this, doesn't work out with our schedule, but like, how can we make this work? And I think her son, who's like 14 or 15, he was like, I can make dinner that day, it's fine, like I can take over duties for dinner that day, because she had to stay then at the library. And she did that, and I think she did it for like 6 months, and now they're like filling the position with somebody for a full-time position. But she just loved the experience of just like being able to be the librarian she's always dreamed of being. And it made no business sense. It was just like her dream, and she's been like, learned lots about books, and she's just thoroughly, but she was kind of done now anyway, that the time was up. But it was just like, it just reminded me when you said like work in a cafe, it's like the similar thing, like it doesn't make business sense, but it's just something you wanted to do for so long. Why not go do it when you have the opportunity?
Yeah, I love that. I think I'd really enjoy it. I've never had a job before.
You've had jobs, you just haven't had that kind of a job.
I've never been employed. I've never worked for somebody else. I was young. I was a kid when I started my first online business, so I just carried on with those. But yeah, I'd love to. I think I'd really enjoy it. So I want to do that for a while. I do. There are bits and pieces. I do some mentoring with graduates at a university. I with their business school. Like I mentor their graduates, and I do have another side SaaS that really is passive. I touch it for a few minutes each month. So there are a couple of bits and pieces, but it's been I'm investing this time in just being over doing and learning about myself and bettering myself.
And no identity crisis. This is like, did you have no identity crisis when you left?
Oh, I've had all the existential doubts. Like
okay, thank you. We were 1 hour in. Like, let's get to it. No, just kidding.
Oh yeah, no, all of that kicked in for sure. Like, do you know what? It wasn't. I don't think my identity was super tied to the business. It wasn't a who am I now that I don't have this. It was more of a like, but what am I going to be doing in future? It was a lot of making peace with uncertainty, and with the idea that I should be being productive. That was a really interesting one to question. Like this core belief. And basically, I'm learning a lot about. I'm discovering a lot of core beliefs. By getting rid of everything out of your life, you start to notice like, why don't I feel okay in that situation? Like from the app that this is a pretty great life. So if there are times where I'm not feeling content, and those for sure I've had, like what is going on there? And it's all these core beliefs of like, I should be being productive. I should be making something more of myself. If I'm not working, then I'm doing something wrong. Like that it's not okay to just relax for a longer period of time. And I don't believe that. Like I don't agree with that belief. But until you question it, and the money thing has been really interesting as well. So the way the payment was structured, I was given, I got some upfront, and then some of it was paid monthly, and the monthly payment was like roughly the same as the salary that I was taking from it before. And so for this period of time, from last April, it was 14 months of payments. So I think next month will be the final one of those. And psychologically, that has been... So like if you had asked me at the beginning, let's say it was like, you can have the same amount of money, would you like it all in one go, or would you like it spread over months? Like the rationalist in me would be like, obviously I'll take it all in one go. Like, there's no benefit to having someone pay it to you periodically. But actually psychologically, it's felt like I've still had an income. And that's felt very comforting. It's like, okay, I'm just spending from the money that's coming in each month. And that's going to shift next month to being, I'm dipping into my savings. And nothing is actually changing. Like that was already my savings. They were just being drip fed to me.
Right.
But it feels very different. So there's been part of me now that's like stressing out about spending that money afterwards. So like those kind of things are really interesting to look at as well.
Yeah, bank account going down is never fun. Keeping it flat or growing, that's nicer.
But like I could set up the same situation. I could just like set up an automation to move some money each month into like from one account to the other, and then I'll feel like I'm still earning it the same as before.
Yeah, right.
And it's crazy.
Yeah, that could just work, right?
Yeah. Or sort out the, crap in our heads that tells us these ridiculous things to begin with. Either
way. I actually, it reminded me when you talked about being productive, because I caught my dad while we were on vacation, because my daughter was drawing and then she stopped the drawing in mid drawing and she turned a page, and my dad was like, "You have to finish that," and I was like, "No, she doesn't." Like, there's like, I mean, she's 8 or no, she's 9. I was like, "There's no, like, this is not an assignment." Like, we're at a cafe, she's drawing for enjoyment. She can't like waste the resources, but she wasn't wasting. She was just like, I was like, "No, she doesn't," and he like looked at me like I was crazy because I was like, "No, she doesn't," because I had to, like, before, I probably, like, if it wasn't my child, I probably wouldn't have thought about it, but since it was my child and he's the grandfather, I was like, I need to actually let her know that is not, or I don't agree with that sentiment, that you have to complete everything you start, because that is extremely stressful. And
those will stick for life.
Yes,
like,
and it's obviously stuck with him, and I was like, nope, we're not having this. We are not passing this down onto the next generation as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I can sit at my cabin and watch the boats go by and do nothing, and it's one of my favorite endeavors. But him and his brother, no way. Like, either you go to the pub and you drink, or you are productive. There's like no, like, you
There's
can't
no in
just like,
between.
no, you have to like do something with the time. But yeah, that was close to that. I don't think he listens to this podcast. I hope not. But anyway, I thought about that when you said that, because yeah, I think they like the creative, being able to be creative without expectations is something that is lost in, not just for us grown-ups, but also more and more for the kids, where it's like it has to like become a finished something for it to be of value, which I don't agree with.
So I guess this is a good place to end this episode, maybe.
Maybe. Do you have any book recommendations since you've been on this like path? We had the 4. What did you call it?
6 pillars of self-esteem.
6 pillars of self-esteem.
I mean, I guess I recommend it because it helped me with this major transformative shift in my life. I didn't enjoy reading it. It was one of those books that like it was beneficial. I got something from it, but it wasn't like a page turner that I was really enjoying the book. It was kind of I read one chapter and then I'm like, I do not want to continue, but I'll read again tomorrow. I knew it was good for me, but I didn't love reading it. Other books, I mean, I have, you can put it in the show links. I have a Goodreads with every book I've read.
Because I remember when, I think that was the microconf we were at, that Dr. Walling talked about what happens to a lot of founders after an exit, and how, there is often identity crisis and some people rushing into new endeavors when they don't really need to, and even depression. And I think the talk is online, but I find that super enlightening because, for a lot of people, the exit is the holy grail, and you get to it, and then you're like, wow, what? Like, who am I? What is my life? What am I gonna do? All of those things become a much larger shift than people imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you for being honest with us.
I've definitely come to a place of like, I think I used to see it as like work is your default place, that you like, that's the core thing in your day, right? And then you fit the other things around it. I'm definitely questioning that idea more. So yeah, for whether so a lot of the books on my reading list are less about the specifics of leaving companies. I don't think there's anything on there in that space, but it's all more about like the stuff that goes on in our heads. That's what I'm really interested in our heads and our hearts, like our internal world that just create like. I see there being so much more leverage there. Like if you can spend an hour working on yourself or an hour working on a thing on the outside, like that time spent looking inwards is so much more valuable because that shifts how we see everything on the outside anyway.
I feel like that was a good note to end on.
Thanks a lot for sharing, and sharing all the details and the emotional aspects of everything.
Thank you for having me.
And if people want to learn more about you and what you're not up to these days, where should they go find you?
I suspect, by the way, if I had to guess, the thing that I end up working on next will be something around this inner world stuff, maybe even helping entrepreneurs with that kind of world. So the best place to find me is either Twitter, Shai SC, SHAISC, or my newsletter, shai.io.
We'll put it in the description. And we'll see everyone around, or we'll see you around the interwebs.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.